Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Eruvin Daf Yud. Begin 2 lines Daf at the top of the Yomid. We continue the discussion regarding the halacha, what's known as nir mibachutz, v'shavim mibifnim. The lechi is only visible from the outside, not from the inside. What's the halacha? Hashiz kos b'tzibakazak and tesker to any time dafachayim. Appreciate everyone joining us for today's Daf. Some of the important ideas, like we mentioned, are nir mibachutz, v'shavim mibifnim. So you could see this from the outside, not because of the color, although that is a cute comment people say, but it's just pointing out what we're identifying here. This looks like an extension from the wall over here. You don't really notice it. From the outside looking at it, you notice there's a lechi. What's the halachic status? Does that function as a lechi or does that not? Then we're going to discuss what's the halacha, which we mentioned in the Mishnah. If, let's say, the entrance, we were talking about often about the height of the kaira. What's what if the width of the mavi is wider than the 10 amas which allowed, let's say 20 amas, what do you do in that type of situation? Is it kosher? If it's not, how can you rectify it? That's the concept of how to make it narrow. And then one of the key terms and concepts is what's called imin merubal parts. If you have more wall than gap, can allow an area to be considered walled even though that there are breaches. That is something that permits an area, and we discuss that as that relates to our daf. Another concept that comes up is called tiyufta v'hilchasa, which is it's like in a question type of way. Is it possible that it's refuted, and that's going to be the halacha? We're going to see that the Gemara is going to refute an opinion, and then it's going to say, oh, but that's actually the halacha falls like that. The concept of pasi b'rois is a unique heter that we'll have in a later daf, which is brought up in today's daf, which is that when they were oile regel, so on the way up they needed water for the animals. The problem was on Shabbos, what are they going to do? The wells are Rishus Yachid, and the street around it is Rishus Rabbin. So they made a unique heter that you have what's called the Yumdin. These are the four corners, and even though it's actually parts of Merubal Ha'imid, they said, okay, it's still considered like it's surrounded four walls, and this is a Rishus Yachid. And we're going to see that as it relates to how we compare that to the laws of Mavin. The halacha of Merubal parts Mishtei Ruchas is in the final of Gemara's discussion, which is generally, when you have more closed area than breached area, that's a permissibility. But what happens if you only have more closed on an area that you're trying to compare it with, only as a combination of two oimits? It's not really that the closed is more than the breached. It's only a combination of two walls that are more than the breached area. What halacha does that have in the two of them joining forces together? So we begin the current daf. 2 lines down at the top of the Yomid and the Yud Daf. We're in the middle of a Gemara that started in the previous daf, that we had this machlokes tanoim of nir mebachutz v'shavim mebifnim, like we said. The lechi you could see from the outside, but it's flush. It's even from the inside. Rabbi Chia said that's a valid. Lechi Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe said it's not valid. Now Rabbi himself had agreed with that of Rabbi Chia, and this is all from the previous daf. But then he asked on himself, which is the same question on Rabbi Chia, from the Mishnah later on. The Mishnah on Daf Tzadi Beis says if you have the smaller one, it's totally breached to the larger one. So we say that the Gedol is mutar because it has a Pesach. It's closed on the four sides. Even the fourth side is like these two things are parts of the wall, and this is the opening. The Ketana is a because it's totally breached. It doesn't have any fourth wall at all. Now, on that the question is, we don't consider the walls of the larger chutzah to be valid walls for the small chutzah. Why not? That should be considered nir mibachutz v'shavim mibifnim. That should be that you have a Pesach on the outside, so you see a Pesach for the small one from the outside. So that should be valid. So Reb Zeir said, and there was actually a three-pronged answer that the Gemara gave. We're talking about that the walls of the small one go into the large one. Not only that, we said that actually they're not centered. And in addition, we're going like Rebbe that requires two pasim. So therefore, it's not going to be valid because you can't view them as part of the walls of, and you can't say lavud because this one has more than 3 tfachim. And it's like Rebbe who requires that there's going to be 2 pasim to permit. And since it's totally breached, it doesn't have 2, it only has 1 here and not a second one over here. That was the previous daf. Now, on that, the Gemara continues and says, Haimai, it's a little bit complicated, this, a few different elements over here. We'll try to explain it very simply. Haimai, says the Gemara, wait a second. If you're going to say that the halacha, the Mishnah of Tzadi Beis, it was as we originally had understood, when the small one is totally in the middle of the larger one, and we said that the extra amma that's remaining, because we had explained that the larger chutzah was 11 amas, and the smaller one was 10 amas. So I said, oh, it's an amma bigger. It sounds like, okay, you have 3 tfachim on either side of the smaller one by the larger one, and you could technically say, oh, that's nir bebachutz b'shavim mevnim on 2 sides, and even so, the Chiddush would be telling me that no, the smaller one's going to be aser. Why? Because nir bebachutz b'shavim mevnim, it would be telling me this halacha that we want to reject Rabbah and Reb Chia from, that even though you can see from the outside, but since it's even on the inside, no, it's not going to have the halachic status as a lechi, not like Reb Chia. Meaning, this is the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is asking on Rabbi's answer. Saying, if you're going to say like the way we want to ask on you, that it's not going to be valid, it's going to be considered not as a lechi, and the Rebbe who requires that there be two pasin for a chatzah, like we said, that you have to have two sides, that Savala Kurab Yesi, it would all make sense. We would understand that Mishnah, because we're about to ask on the way Reb Chia, and Rabbi says that that's not going to make sense. So we're having a lot of different points of variables over here, but each one is integral to understand what the case is talking about. Why do we need that the bigger one is exactly an amma than the smaller one? Why say that that's 10 ammas? We had a tradition, a Bryce that said that Mishnah is talking about the Chazak Gedel is 11 ammas, small ones is 10 ammas. Why do you need that? Because it makes sense if we would say not like you. Because yes, you really do have near b'chutz v'shav b'fnim. If it would be exactly 3 tvachim on this side, 3 tvachim on that side, and and that would be the chiddush that it's not considered as a lechi for the inner line. And Rabbi who says that you need to have two pasim on either side, Savala Karbisi, also Karbisi that he says in the Mishnah later on that the Yudalim Abayz, he says the lechi cannot be smaller in its width than 3 tvachim. So that's even by a mother, which has greater leniencies in the lechi. For sure, the pasin of a chatzar, which is what the Mishnah there is talking about, chatzeris, it needs that width of 3 tvachim, like Rabbi Yossi needs by a lechi to have a width of 3 tvachim. Now, based on what we're saying, with Reb Zera v'd Ravina, which those were the two answers we had from the previous daf, that Ravina had explained that you needed to be a greater distance from the one on, although he said one's amma bigger than the other one, we said it's not 3 and 3. One wanted to say, oh, you know why? Because one's 2 tvachim difference and one's 4 tvachim difference. That lesser. No, we wouldn't have their answers, their interpretations of our Mishnah. Because if that would be the case, then actually the bigger one would not be permitted. This is part of the cheshbon. So again, the half cup in one of these cheshbonos. The bigger one would not be permitted because if you had 4 and 2, then if you're saying that Rebbe's like Rav Yosef, the bigger one itself needs a lechi, needs an opening, and it's only going to be valid if the pasin are 3 tvachim. If you would have 4 and 2, the larger one itself wouldn't be valid because you're like Rebbe, who says that every chatzar needs 2 pasin. And not only that, Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yosef that holds that every pas has to be 3 tvachim. If that would be the case, then you wouldn't be able to explain the way Ravina says, oh, that here's 4 and there are 2. I remember we said that in the previous stuff because we wanted to say, well, it's not going to be loved when the smaller ones are going into the bigger ones. For the way Rabbah wanted to interpret it, we're saying you wouldn't be able to say that because the way we're interpreting now, you would have 4 and 2 that wouldn't work for the big one. Now, once you don't have Ravina, you also don't have Reb Zeir, who said that with Nechnasim, that the smaller walls are coming into the bigger ones, because since we're saying it's exactly 3 and 3, the way we're trying to explain right now, so what would it be effective if the smaller ones are going into the bigger ones? But even if it's coming in, we would still say love it then, because it's within 3 tvachim of each one, and the walls take up a little bit, so actually it would be like it closed off. So it wouldn't go ahead and make a difference if the smaller walls are coming in anyway. So we wouldn't have Ravina Reb Zeir's interpretation of that Mishnah. And we would not be permitting it, the smaller one. Why not? Simply because it's near b'chutz v'shavim b'mifnim, which would not have the halachic status as a lechi. Again, that's all the case we're trying to describe, what this Mishnah would be interpreted based on if you hold near b'chutz v'shavim b'mifnim is not a valid lechi. This is what we're asking at Rabbi. You want to say that is valid, but wait a second. Let's first explain how it makes sense according to how we interpret. Mishum Hachi, that's why, and this is the main punchline over here, that's why the Tana gave a shiur to explain that the bigger one is Ketana B'Eser, the small one's 10 amas, but and the larger one is 11 amas, meaning that we wanted that the bigger one to be bigger than the smaller one by 1 amma. Why? Because we wanted that the bigger one should have 3 tvachim on this side and 3 tvachim on that side. Why? Like we explained, Mishum de Rebbe, because Rebbe who says that you need to have 2 boards to validate any chatzir, has to have them as a width because Savala Karbisi was a Karbisi. And therefore, the reason why we needed to be a bigger was not because of the smaller one, it was because of the bigger one. The only way you can validate the bigger one is if it's not bigger. Why? Because it has to have 2 pasim like Rebbe. So what? Because he holds like Rabbi Yossi holds, you have to have 3 tvachim to validate a lechi, and for sure a pas of a chatzir. So that's why we needed to be an amma bigger. And again, we would just explain all the other variables just to say why it wouldn't be with 4 and 2, because then you wouldn't have 3 and 3, which is like Ravina, and then Reb Zeir wouldn't make a difference if the wall's coming in, because if it's 3 and 3, anyways, you would say love. But Eli Amrit, this is the punchline of the question now. But if you're going to say near when you see it on the outside, and yet you don't see it on the inside because it's totally breached, you want to say neither mishum lechi, that it would be effective as a lechi. And the reason why is the smaller one forbidden? Not because of nir b'chutz, your nir b'chutz is valid. Rather, it's because Like you wanted to say in the previous daf, because we hold like Reb Zeir because the smaller walls are going into the bigger ones. And we're also saying like Ravina that, one is 2 tvachim away, one is 4 tvachim away, and if you cannot say love from both sides, and if you can't say love on both sides, then you don't have passing on both sides. And we're saying like Rebbe that you need to pass on both sides. Even so, the big one's going to be permitted because of these gefufin, these different boards that you have behind the entry of the smaller one, even though the width of one of them is only going to be 2 tvachim, the way you're interpreting. And so what do you have to say? Rebbe lois of the Rabbi, that obviously Rebbe, who holds you need 2 passing, fine. But it doesn't hold like Rebbe Yasi that says it have to be each one 3 tvachim. That's so far what you would have to say according to your interpretation. Now here's the question. If that's the case, saying that the big one is 11 amas, where the Tana is telling you that the bigger one is bigger by an amma, lamali. Why do I need the Brisa to tell me that the big one's 11 amas, the small one's 10 amas? Why do you have to say that? Either way you look at it. Why are you telling me the big one's 1 amma bigger? It could either be to tell me why the bigger one's mutter, or tell me why the small one's aser. But either way, I don't understand why you tell me it's amma bigger. If you come and tell me that now the bigger one's going to be permitted because now it has 2 shiurim, 2 remnants on either sides, like the opinion of Rabbi to have 2 pasim. There would be sufficient if the bigger one is 10 amas with 2 tvachim. Because you're telling me Rabbi doesn't hold like Rabbi Yasi, right? Because if you held like Rabbi Yasi, you wouldn't be able to have the 4 and 2. You would have to have 3 and 3. But your whole interpretation is only saying when it's 4 and 2. And that's why you don't say love it, and that's why this small one's forbidden. So then wait a second, if you come to validate the bigger one, I don't need an amma bigger. I just need a tefach on either side that it should be bigger. Why are you saying 11 amas? And if you're coming to say, no. The reason why it has to be amma bigger is to say why the small one is forbidden, because you need to have that the walls of the bigger one have to be further away than the incoming walls of the smaller one, at least on one side to be 4 tvachim. So that we don't say loved to permit it, and to learn out that if not for that, we would permit the small one from near b'chutz through loved, and you're only going to have that because if it's an amma bigger, then we could have 1 wall 2 tvachim and 1 wall 4 tvachim. And that says the Gemara, no, Lashmin, and you should have said that the bigger one is much bigger than Miflikli Tuba. That's much further away, because then it would be a definitive teaching. Because right now, as it is, by saying that the bigger one is an amma bigger than the smaller one, it's not so clear. Because if you, let's say, would take that bigger amma and split up 3 tvachim on either side, then there would be loved. And then actually the small one would be permitted the way you're saying. But if the bigger one is much wider, then it would have been a clearer halacha. We would have known that the reason why the small one is forbidden because its walls that are coming into the big one are too far from the big one. And as Rashi says, don't tell me that the reason why the Tana said specifically this measurement of the big one being an amma bigger and not more than that is to tell you that, it has to be at least an amma to make it forbidden because less than that would be permitted. It's not true. Because if the bigger one was only 4 tefachim bigger than the small one, it would also be aser. Because then you would say one side is a chatzi tefach, and the other side has 3.5 tefachim. And then the bigger one would be permitted because it has some wall on either side, has 3.5 on this side and a half, 3.5 on this side. And the small one would be aser because you wouldn't have loved from 2 sides the way you tell me the Rebbe holds it, which is a Garbesi. So either way, why are you telling me that it's amma bigger? Rather says the Gemara, obviously that what you see from here is why do we say that the big one is an amma bigger than the small one? Is specifically because we wanted that there should be 3 tefachim on either side. Because we were coming to tell you why the bigger one is permitted because Rebbe needs 2 pasim and each pas has to be 3 tefachim like Rabbi Yasi. And even so, the small one is going to be forbidden. Why? Because near b'chutz, although it is considered visible from the outside, it is considered part of the opening for the inner one. We do see it, at least on the outside, as part of the inner one. Because it is only 3 tefachim, and you do say love it, but still, we don't qualify that as a lechi. Shmamina. Obviously, we see, says the Gemara, not like, that was what the question they asked on Rabbah, on Rebchia, you see not like them from that Mishnah. Obviously, that Mishnah holds, is not going to be considered as a lechi. A little bit of a complicated cheshbon, but basically that was the Gemara was saying, that you could really understand why it's an amma bigger, according to our interpretation. That it is considered, that's not considered as a lechi. But according to your cheshbon that it doesn't make sense. Why would it say it's amma bigger, and therefore you see not like you? Now, Rav Yisrael says that Lo Shmili Hoshmaita. He says, I didn't hear this teaching. Meaning, which teaching? The teaching of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, who assumedly had heard this teaching from his father Rav Huna, from the previous daf, which was like Reb Chia, the nir b'chutz, if it's seen from the outside, that it's qualified as a lechi. In other words, he didn't hear those who want to say, that we just rejected, that it's considered as a lechi, says, I never heard this teaching. On that Abai says, At aminalan. What do you mean? You yourself had told us this teaching, v'hamer lon, and you told us this on this following teaching. You yourself quoted this teaching of Rav Huna. You're saying you didn't hear this teaching, which was the name of Rav Huna. Rav Huna himself said a teaching that you proved that he holds that it's considered as a lechi, if it's the name of a chutz. What was Rav Huna's teaching? Lechi hamoishich im dafnei shel mavli. If there's a lechi that continues along the wall of the mavli going outside, as you can see in the picture where it lengthens the wall, basically it's a continuation of the wall of the mavli going outside. It's obviously it's along the length of the wall of the mother, and it continues. So essentially, that's what's called shavim b'fnim b'nei b'chutz, because the edge of the lechi covers the entire width of the wall, which is wider than it, and you don't see the actual lechi itself from the inside, but obviously from the outside you see that. So on that it depends. Pachitz midalad amas says Rabbi Huna, if it's less than dalad amas, this board, so nidim mishum lechi, then it's going to qualify as a lechi. And then the mushtamish im, or the gear says ad chudei panimi. And you can use up until the innermost part of that lechi. Dalad amas, if the board is dalad amas, then nidim mishum mavi. Then we can't consider this as a lechi anymore. We consider it as a mavi because it's so big. V'asel shtamish b'kulei, and then you're not allowed to use the whole area of the mavi because you don't have a lechi, because it's too big to be considered as a lechi. It's considered as a mavi. Now, that was Rav Huna's teaching. The at amrit lan alani. You said regarding that teaching, Rav Huna, shema min class, we could infer 3 halachas from this teaching of Rav Huna. Shema mina, first of all, we learn bein lechayayin aser, that the area opposite lechi is forbidden to utilize because Rav Huna said at chudei panimi. You can only use up until the innermost part of the lechi, obviously because you can't use the area opposite the lechi. B'shema mina, we learn the second thing is that meshach mavai ba'arba, that the length of the mavai is 4 amas, from the fact that you said that if the lechi is 4 amas long, we're going to qualify it as a mavri. Obviously, and these are all machlekes that we had, but we're learning it from Rav Huna what his opinions are, that we consider a mavri the length is 4 amas. Because he's saying when the lechi is 4 amas long, then it's not valid. It's like a mavri. Obviously, because a mavri, its length is 4 amas. And the third thing that we learn is near mebachutz, and this is what the question is from. You, Rav Yosef, you yourself said, because Rav Yosef forgot his learning, he said that you see that if you see it on the outside, but it's equal on the inside. You see, you do qualify that as a lechi because that was what the teaching had said. And he said nidim mishum lechi, even though it was on the outside and you don't see it on the inside. So therefore, you see that you yourself said Rav Huna, this teaching, that it is considered as a lechi. Now the Gemara concludes the halacha, and the halacha is that near mibachutz. If you see from the outside, but it's equal on the inside, you don't see from the inside. It is qualified as a lechi. So the Gemara says, wait a second. To Yufta, you just finished refuting this interpretation from the Mishnah later in Daf Tzadi Beis, and now you're saying the halacha is that it is a lechi, but you brought the halacha from Chatzik Ketan Shem Tigdel, which started off this whole amid, that we brought a raya that you say it's not a lechi. How can you say it is a lechi? So the Gemara, yes, it is considered a lechi, Mishum D'Tani Reb Chia Kavasei. Because since we have Reb Chia, which is what we brought from the previous Daf, which we had when this Kaisel Shatzid Echad Kanas, we said that when the wall goes in, we said we don't care if it goes in on the inside, it goes in on the outside. We said, which is considered even near Mebachutz or near B'fnim, we said from the previous Daf that Reb Chia holds it's going to be considered as a lechi. So since Reb Chia, who is the choicest types of prices, he holds that it is considered as a lechi. So although from the Mishnah later on Tzadi Beis, it sounds like that it would not be considered as a lechi, we still going to rule the halacha is like that Bryce of Reb Chia, that it is going to be considered, because he says clearly that it's going to be considered as a lechi, and therefore that is the halacha. Ner b'chutz b'sham b'fnim is nidon mishum lechi. Now the Gemara continues with the halacha of the Mishnah. Up until now we were discussing regarding when it's too high, it's higher than 20 amas, what the halacha is. Then the Mishnah says that the mavei also has dimensions regarding its width. So he said that you could only have up until a width of 10 amas. What happens if it's wider than 10? So it says the Mishnah about Rochav Me'aseh, if it's wider than 10 amas, you should diminish its width. Which, let's say here, it's 20 amas. So what you got to do is you got to make poles, diminish its width, and then you only have up until a width of 10 amas. Now, Tana, we learned the Brisa, actually it's a machlekes. Omar Abai says, Tana, we learned the Brisa, Rochav Me'aseh Yemai. Tana Kama says, like we say in our Mishnah, if it's wider than 10 amas, you make it smaller. But Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Ein tzarich l'mayit. He says, no, you could have the mavoi wider, even though we have a current lechi, it can be wider than Tamas. You don't have to make it smaller. Now, that says the Gemara, Ba'ad Kamo, how wide could the mavoi be that Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that you don't have to make it smaller? It could be as wide as you want it to be. How wide could that be? So and that says the Gemara, Savar Rab Achi Kamed Rab Yisuf L'Mim. Rab Achi thought to explain in front of Rab Yisuf to say Ad Shleish Esri Amma B'Shleish. Okay, although he says it could be wider than 10 amas, it doesn't be as wide as you want. He would allow it up until 13 and a third amas. And he says it's a kabel from the boards of the wells, which was a unique heter that was made, as the Mishnah teaches later on the second paragraph of the Zayin Beis, that you can make these boards for these wells in Rosh Hashanah, because what happens is that these wells are 10 tvachim deep. Now, you're not allowed to fill up water from them and put it by the edge to give it to your animals, because essentially you're taking out from Rosh Hashanah, which is what the pit is, and you put it out to Rosh Hashanah. Now, the sages made a unique heter to allow these 4 diyumdin, like we said, these 4 double poles, it's like going in both directions, for the 4 corners, and then that makes the area here in between those diyumdin, diyu, it means 2, diyumdin is like a double pole, to make it into Rosh Hashanah, and you're allowed to fill up the water and put it there on the side. Now, Rabbi Huda himself permitted to distance these diyumdin from each other, what's called maloi shnei revakis, 2 let's say herds of teams of oxen, which each one has 4 cows. Now the thickness of a cow is an amma and 2/3, which for 8 animals is going to make 13 and a third ammas. So on that he says the following kabbalah. Uma pasibirais, if this case of pasibirais, the boards of the wells, we're very lenient regarding it. That we permit even parts of merubal, even though you have more breached area than closed area, which usually invalidates in a closed area, we're lenient. And we say that, okay, it's going to be valid by the Pasbiras. And yet still, you didn't permit if it's going to be more than 13 amas in the third. That's the limitation for how wide the opening could be. Okay, so then Mavoi, by parts of merubal, by a Mavoi or an alleyway, you don't permit if the breached area is more than the closed area. Obviously, you're not going to permit more than the area of 13 and third amas. That's going to be the limitations, because if the lenient thing you don't let that much, for sure not, which is more stringent in requiring a closed area, for sure you're not going to be lenient more than 13 and a third. To which Gemara rejects in 2 different ways. The Gemara says no. To the contrary, that is the idea. In other words, from the fact that you're coming to say why it would be forbidden by the Mavi more than 13 amas in the third, is actually the reason why it actually should be permitted. Because you don't allow by the Mavi to be more breached area than closed area, that's why I would tell you why it'd be permitted even more. Because by the Pasibirais, where you have very little closed area, okay, so you can't be so lenient to allow more than 13 and third amas, because it's totally breached. Where are we seeing any opening? But by the Mavi, where the majority is closed, maybe I would permit even more, as the Gemara says. Yeah, there where we allow more breached than closed. Okay, we can't allow more than 13 and a third amas. But Mavi by parts but by Mavi, where you can't have more breached than closed, you have more closed in the whole Mavi than breached. Maybe we would allow more than 13 and a third. Don't tell me that you're limited to that. Maybe you would allow more. And then the Gemara says, I can tell you the other way around. Actually, no, that you cannot even learn out from Pasibirais, that it could even be 13 and a third, maybe it'd only be able to be less than that. Why? Because Pasibirais, by what do you find by the boards of the wells? We already make one leniency that we validate. We see we're very lenient by those laws of Pasibirais. We let you have more breached and closed area. Oh, so maybe we make other leniencies that we consider as an opening up until 13 amas and a third. Because you see, it's a very lenient halacha. But by Mavoi, no, maybe I wouldn't have this leniency. Maybe I wouldn't allow it to be more than 10 amas. And therefore, the Gemara is not proven regarding how wide the opening could be according to Yehuda to learn it out as a kabel chamer b'Pasibirais. I can tell you it's not a kabel chamer from either way. Maybe she'll let even more, and maybe shouldn't even let more than 10 amas, because there we let 13 and 30 because we're very lenient. Who said we would have the leniency over here by Mavoi, and therefore we don't have a source. Now the Gemara continue on this theme about if the Mavoi, how to narrow an opening that's too wide. Let's say it's 20 amas. So tell me, Levi taught a brisa. Mavoi shurach of esrim amas. If you have a Mavoi that's 20 amas wide, again we said according to our opinion, not like Rabbi Yehuda, it could only be 10 amas wide. So what do? So he says is that no, it's kana be'emtziyus. What you do is you put a pole in the middle, v'dayek, and it's sufficient. So you have your 2 lechis, and you have, although there's 20 amas, you put another stick in the middle, and that's sufficient. Now, why is that good? Because, oh great, that just broke it up. You have 10 amas and you have 10 amas. But Levi taught this brisa, and he says, no, the ein halacha ka'isa mishnah. Halacha does not fall like this mishnah. Why not? A concept Rashi tells us, which we're going to shortly see, what's called asya avir, the high geese, or the high geese, mavata lelekana. The airspace overpowers the stick, and you have so much empty space. It's mevatel, it nullifies. It's like almost this stick is not going to be over here, and therefore that's not going to be a valid type of approach. So, and those that say that it wasn't just Levi who said there was Amar Shmuel Mishmei Levi. Shmuel said name of Levi. Is not valid. That would not be a valid way of permitting the mavi to lower to lessen the width. It's like it's almost not there. So then the Gemara says, okay, so what should we do to diminish the width? That's what Shmuel said in the name of Levi is Kintim and Beis. What you do is like this. Oisa pas gevaya asar. You make a board that's 10 tvachim high. B'meshech arba amas, that has a length of 4 amas. Umamidri la'arker shel mavi. And you put it on the length of the mavi, as this picture shows, in the middle of the opening. So now here, since you have a valid mavi in the length of every board, meaning the board itself is the length of the mavi, so it's like you have 2 different alleyways over here. And you're making one entrance on one side, and you make another entrance for the other side. Oh, okay, that's less than 10 amas, and this is not being nullified because this is not like just a board. This is a different mavoi. This is a whole wall over here. And therefore, that's what you do if you want to diminish the width of the mavoi. That's one approach. Inami, another approach is like this. Kid Rabbi Huda. Like a teaching of Rabbi Huda that we're going to compare to our case. Rabbi Huda said the following case. He says, he was talking about if, let's say, the width of the mavi is 15 amas. Again, it can only be 10. It's 15. So says Rabbi Huda, what should you do? So what you do is you distance 2 amas from the wall, and you start over there to make a board. And you make a board that's 3 amas long to close the opening. So it comes out that these 5 amas are considered closed. Why? Because this breach of 2 amas has oimed meruba ala parts. It has the closed area that's right next to it that's more than the breach, because this is 3 and this is 2. Now, Rashi explains when it's our case, so let's say the width is 20 amas. So you do that also for the second side. You go away 2 amas and you put 3 amas. So again, you'll only have 10 amas in the inside. Or Rashi says, you'll make a board that's not just 3 amas, you'll make a board that's 6 amas and you'll distance it 4 amas from the wall. And that's going to permit that one side by unmovable parts, because you have 6 over 4, which is 10. And then you'll have 10 remaining, so it'll be an opening of 10 amas. That is the second interpretation of how you could minimize the width that's more than 10 amas. But now the Gemara has a series of questions on this interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. V'amai, why did he require us to go ahead and put 3 amas together? Because you're making a distance here, 2 amas breach, then you have 3 amas on the side of it, so that'll be closing over 5 amas, so you're left now only 10. Why is he required doing it 3 together? Says the Gemara, Yasa pas ama, and the Mefarshim explained this. Is the Gemara asking we could have been more lenient, we could have been more stringent? Taisa discusses, but be that it may, the Gemara is asking there's other ways we could have done it. Yasa pas ama mechza. What do you mean? You could make a board that's only an am and a half for the corner near the wall, and what you do is v'yarchik shtei amas, then you distance 2 amas, and then v'yasa pas ama mechza, and then you can make another board that's an am and a half near the larger opening, which for some total is going to be 3. Meaning we were saying distance 2 amas, then make a board 3 amas. Why do you have to do that? I could get 3 amas of closed area by making an am and a half, making an opening over here in the middle of 2 amas, which is the 2 amas we said we're going to close off, and make another am and a half over here. Why didn't you say it like that? Now, since you're not permitting it like that, because what you have over here is you have parts meruba lo imid on one side, and you have on the imid on the other side. Only, meaning this is 2 amas, this am and a half, this am and a half. This 2 amas is bigger than each pole on its side. So each one, the parts is more than the imid. Unless, if you combine the imid together, then the 2 of them are going to be more than the parts. So why didn't you say this case? Shema Mino, we could infer from there, from the fact that you don't want to combine the 2 of them, is that when you have the closed area more than the breach, only if you combine the 2 sides, then lo yhava imid, we don't consider that as more closed area. Rather, look at each one independently. Each one independently, the breached area is more than the closed one, and it nullifies each pole on the side of it. So it's going to come out that the opening is more than 10 amas. Obviously, that's the halacha, because then why didn't you say that case? So the Gemara says, no. Truthfully, I would tell you that in general, if you didn't have that this pole would be having breached areas on either side of this pole, then actually the halacha would be hava. It would be considered as oimid meruba, because we would combine the 2 oimids to mevatel the parts individual that's in between it. But that's only if this is the only thing we were looking at. But Vishani Hach in this case is different, because the Asi Avir, the Haigisa, the concept that we mentioned from Rashi before. Because what happens is, you have the airspace over here, which is 2 amas, vavir the haigis, and then you have the airspace of the large opening over here, which is the main entryway, umavatali, and they're nullifying this one board that's an am and a half between them. So again, if all you had was this area, which is these two and this, you would say merubah parts together and nullify this. But here, this pole has to contend with the airspace on the side of it over here. So they're bigger than this on both sides. So they're being mavatal on this pole, and that's why you can't say meruba ala part. So though generally you would, but in this case you can't, because asavir the haigis mavatal for this pole. But then the Gemara suggests, okay, fine. I'll ask a different case. The yasa pasam, we could get another. We could do the same dimensions but with different boards. The yasa pasam, make a board that's an amma. The yarchikama, then distance it an amma. The yasa pasam, make another board an amma. The yarchikama, distance it an amma. The yasa pasam, make another board an amma. So again, you're having 3 ammas together with 2 ammas of a breached area, and you'll have 3 versus 2, and then you'll have from the 15 ammas only 10 ammas left. Why do you have to say make an airspace of 2, then a board of 3? Do 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Says the Gemara, Shema, obviously from the fact you didn't say that case, because oimid kiparetz aser, this is something similar but different. When the closed area is exactly the same as the breached area, not oimid meruba, but oimid kiparetz, when it's the same amount, which is a machlekes Rav Papa and Rabbi Shloimy at the end of the parak. So it says the Gemara from here over Yehuda's teaching, you could obviously see that he holds like Rav Huna, and therefore every amah that's breached, which stands next to the oimid that's the same amount, would make it forbidden, and therefore it's not considered as closed, because oimid kiparetz is not like oimid. The fact that it's the same amount would not be considered like it's closed. So he's going, no, loyal mutter. Truthfully, I would tell you that he holds that generally that would be okay.
Left side, there's more oimid on the poles because there's 3 poles in 2 spaces.
Right.
So you're going to them, it says more oimid on the poles. It's not k oimid.
Yes and no, because you have the avra on this side.
Yeah, but I'm looking from this side. Now it's going from this side to the wall.
Right, but what's with these 2 poles? Meaning this over here, this oimid kiparetz. Unless you're saying that you're combining, which we're saying that.
Obviously, we're talking that.
No, but that would only be oimid merubah parts that you're saying b'tziruf. Yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about each one of these cases, but that's only b'tziruf. But when you're saying in each one independently, this is oimid kiparetz. Each one is the same amount as the other one. So on that says the Gemara, truthfully, I would tell you generally holds that it is going to be permitted. But the Shani Hachi here, it's different. Why? Again, the same answer. Because the Asa, the Haigis, you have the airspace of the Pesach HaGadol, the large opening, and you have the Haigis, you have of this opening, which is the 1 amma that's breached, and it's nullifying this 1 amma, that pole that's standing over here near the opening, which is larger than the Oimid, and therefore you can't go ahead and say Oimid Kiparet. In other words, to close it off the area, because it's not going to make the opening is going to still be more than 10 amas. If you want to use just 3 of closed and 2 of open, this 1 pole is not going to work again. So it's going to be more than 10 amas. It's going to be more because this pole is not going to be working because of us having the high geese, and that's why he didn't say that case. The Gemara has this 3rd case. Okay, fine. I'll tell you a different case. What you do is like this: the archik amma, distance an amma, the yasa pas amma mechsa, make a board an amma and a half. The archik amma, distance an amma. The yasa pas amma mechsa, make a board an amma and a half. Now you don't have the airspace of the amma together with the airspace of the opening to nullify this board that's an amma and a half, because this airspace, which only an amma, is bottled to this pole because it's less than that pole. So therefore, you can't say your concept of it's not true. The airspace of this is bigger, but this is not bigger. This is an amma and a half. This is only an amma. So this is bottled to them. And Rashi says in this case would have been better because here you don't have to have a breach in one place of 2 ammas the way Rabbi Yehuda said. He said make a breach of 2 ammas and make a board of 3 ammas. Here it's better because here you don't have any breach that's so big, and you don't have to have 1 board of 3. You could have 2 boards of an amma and a half. Why didn't you say that case? So the Gemara concedes and says yes. In the Chanami, you're right. That approach would have been valid and would have been better. But you're right. But the rabbi didn't require you to go through that effort to get 2 different boards. They said just let a breach of 2 ammas and get 1 board of 3 ammas. Didn't make you go get a saw and start cutting into halves and start distancing an amma, an amma and a half, an amma and a half. They didn't require you to do that, and therefore that's why you didn't say that case. But you're right. That would have been a valid case. But now the Gemara asks a question and says, wait a second, but I'll have just a general question. If you're telling me that you could put boards to go ahead and break off the areas, But let's be considered that people are going to leave the large opening, and they're going to go in through the small openings. So he's saying make a gap. We said if it's 20 amas wide, we said according to Rabbi Yehuda, what you do is that you make 2 amas breach, make 3 amas up close, and then you have only 10 amas over here, and then you get on the other side, you'll have 3 amas up close and 2 amas over here. But then maybe people are going to come in through the side areas, and that's going to nullify the status of this being called a Pesach, because no one's using this anymore. If this is not a Pesach anymore, that means to say that the lechi that's prepared for, as Tosfos says, you have to have a lechi over here. If this is a lechi over here preparing it for this Pesach, comes out that really this Mavi doesn't have a lechi. Why doesn't it have a lechi? Because no one's coming in over here. This is not a Pesach to consider lechi, because everybody's walking in on the side. So why should we not be concerned for that? And that then this Mavi doesn't have a lechi, because that's not even a Pesach, because no one's walking in there, everyone's walking on the side. So Amar Rav Adam Amasi said, no, Chazak, we have a presumption. No one's leaving a wide entryway. They're coming in a small entryway. In other words, we don't have to be concerned for that. Says the Gemara, why? I don't understand. Why is it Rabbi and Rabasi, who they require actually, they talk about, we said in Daf, hey, regarding a mavei that was breached on the side, towards the front of the mavei. We said that if it's 3 tfachim, it doesn't permit the mavei. Now, although generally a breach does not invalidate if it's less than 10 amas to make the mavei forbidden, they said that case is going to be forbidden because they were concerned maybe people are going to come in by the side wall that's breached 3 tfachim and it's going to nullify it from being considered as a Pesach. So, okay, we don't have any good pictures for that, but if let's say this side wall is breached, they said if it's 3 tfachim breached over here, they said that it's going to nullify it and it's not going to be considered as a mavei with a Pesach to have the lechi good because no one's even using this as a Pesach, they're coming in over here. So why is it any different? So the Gemara says, no, it's different. Hasam over there, you could be concerned because that small breach was on the side of the mavei. So that it's making it a shortcut. You could come in through the side. Hach over here, but it's by the front of the mavei. So then, like might be it's not diminishing any walking space. You have a wide opening here, a narrow opening over here. We're not concerned about that. People are going to leave it. Therefore, this is still going to be valid as a mavei to be a Pesach to be considered as lechi is validating the whole area over there. Now we continue in the related discussion to this halacha of Oymen Meruba. It's non-hasam. We learn over there in the Mishnah Masechtas Kalim that says Urha Asla. You have, we'll explain in a moment what this asla is, but if you have the leather of an asla, the chalal shalai, and the open space of it, mitzdarf and betefach, they all combined for the shiur of a tefach of a handbreadth for the halachas of tumas oil. So it says the Gemara, my Urha Asla. What is the leather of the asla? So it says Ur kisa shall base like kisa. It's the leather covering of the bathroom, of the toilet, meaning of nobility. What they used to have is essentially like imagine like our toilet is that they had the hole of the toilet, which combined with it the leather that goes around it to be considered a full tefach. Now, what's the significance of it being considered tefach? Is if let's say beneath it there's an olive size of a dead person and his vessels, so it's considered as an oil to be metami because the oil is only metami if it's a tefach, if it has the thickness of a handbreadth. If it's less than that, you're not going to have a tumah of oil, as the Mishnah says in Olis. You have to have a tefach by a tefach with a height of a tefach, and then that brings a tumah beneath it, considered as an oil. So we're saying that here the leather seat of the toilet with the hole of the toilet, they all combine for the shiur of a tefach to be considered as an oil. Because although that the closed area is not all of it, there's a hole that's part of the toilet, still it's all going to combine. Now says the Gemara, the Kama, and how big could the hole be? And this is why it's coming into our Gemara's topic, that it's going to be batal to the oimid, which is the leather seat around, that it's going to be considered nullified to it, and that we're going to consider as if it's closed, the whole thing, and that we consider the whole toilet as a tefach. So Kiyas Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, he says, it's ba'ay mikan, that's ba'ay mikan. You have 2 finger breadth of the toilet seat on one side, 2 finger breadth on the other side, that's ba'ay revach ba'emtza, and you have 2 finger breadth in the middle. That is the dimensions of the toilet. Now that makes for a total of 6 finger breadth. 6 finger breadth, we'll see shortly, is the measurement of a tefach. That's going to be considered as a valid oil. When Rabbi came, he says, no, etzba mechz mikan. It's a finger and a half from this side. Etzba mechz mikan, you have a finger and a half from this side. Etzba revach be'emtza, and you have a finger in the middle. Which if you calculate 1/2 and 1/2 and 1, that's 3 plus 1, that's 4 finger breadth. So Amalei Ba'al Rav Dimi, said Rav Dimi, mi pal gisu. Are you disagreeing? You're saying it's 4 finger breadth total, and you're saying it's 6 finger breadth? Amalei says, no. Ravin's talking about Rav Navasa. He's talking about by a larger tefach, which you're measuring which five types of fingers with that of thumbs. Rav Dimi says, I'm talking about bizutrus. I'm talking about that you're measuring the tefach with pinkies, with smaller fingers. And therefore, we're not really disagreeing because, as the Gemara says in Menachos of Memal from the Beis, a biblical tefach, a hand breadth, depends what type of finger you're using to measure how much is going to be the hand breadth. If you're using thumbs are thicker, so then you only need 4 thumbs. If you're using middle fingers, it's going to be 5, and if you're using the pinky, it's going to be 6. So when I said it's 6 finger breadth, if it's 6, it's ba'is, I'm talking about the pinkies. He who said 4 is talking about the thumbs, but that comes out to be the same dimensions of that of a tefach. He's just using the bigger thumb, the bigger finger, I'm using the smaller finger. To which Amalei Sabai said interesting to him, he says, no, la'ai, truth is palgisa, you are disagreeing. Why? What do we disagree? We're both saying the same thing. He says, no. You know what you're disagreeing about? You're disagreeing, and this is where it comes up to our Gemara's discussion, when you have that oimid meruba ala parts, that you only have the closed area more than the breached area, when it's from both sides together. Lididach, according to you, have a oimid mishtei ruches. It is going to be considered closed from both sides because none of the closed areas have enough to nullify the open space of the toilet that's in the middle until you combine both of them to nullify. Whereas L'Ravin, according to Ravin, that he actually said that the cavity of the hole is less than any one of the sides, he holds Meruch Achas Hava Oimid. Only from one side it's going to be considered, if the Oimid is bigger than the parts, it's going to be considered Oimid Meruba. But Mishtei Ruchas Lava Oimid. But if it's on 2 sides, it's not going to be considered as an oimid to combine to nullify the parts. And he says, I'll prove to you. If you think that you're not disagreeing with him, then Ravin, you know what he should have said when he wanted to say his measurements of saying that it's 4 finger breadth? Not the way he says it, that it's a finger and a half, and a finger and a half on either side, and a finger in the middle, which each oimid is more than the parts. No, he should have said etzba v'shlish mikan, a finger and a third on one side. That's Mishlish Mikan, that's third on one side. That's Mishlish Revach Bamsa, and that finger and the third in the middle. That you would have got 1 and a third, 1 and a third, 1 and a third, would have made for 4. And if he would hold that you could combine the oimates, then that would be Oimid Meruba ala part by combining the two of them, Mishtei Ruches. So therefore, the fact that he didn't say that, rather he said each oimid is more than the parts, because it doesn't help, it doesn't combine. You have to have each oimid Meruba on the parts. To which a Rav Dimi responds to Abai says, no, you got it wrong. So what are you saying, Plagina? We disagree? Then Lididi. Then my opinion, then I shouldn't be saying the way I'm saying that you have 2 finger breadth on either side and 2 finger breadth in the middle. You know what I should have said? You have a finger and 2/3 on one side. You have a finger and 2/3 on one side. And 2 finger breadth and 2/3 of empty space in the middle. And that is, I should have said a case where the cavity is more than each individual closed area. And that's why they combine to say, but still they combine and they're going to be bigger together than the cavity in the middle. But now, obviously that's not what I hold. And therefore that's not what I'm disagreeing with him regarding. Rather, I'm disagreeing regarding Paritz Ka'imid. The way he described the case was 2 finger breadth on either side and 2 etzbayim, 2 finger breadth in the middle. They're all the same. That's Paritz Ka'imid. If you want to say what I disagree with him, is the Paritz Ka'imid Pagina. When it's the same amount, when the breached area is the same as the closed amount, by me, that's what I'm essentially saying. I'm saying it's 2 and 2 and 2. So Paritz Ka'imid, I'm going to say that it's going to be mevatel the parts. But Ravin, who said that it's etzba mechza on this side and etzba, 1 finger and a half on either side and only a finger in the middle, he says that the parts has to be less than the oimid on either side. There's not going to be oimid unless each one of the oimids are more than the parts. That itself is going to be parts ka-oimid. He doesn't hold that's going to be valid. That's not going to be considered as an oimid close. So one of the things we spoke about in today's daf, from Eruvin Daf Yud, was we had a question on the answer of Rabbah from the previous daf, who he had said that nir b'bachutz is valid. The Gemara asked from the Mishnah on the Tzadi base, which said that you had by the Chatzar Ketana and that was breached to the Chatzar Gedaylom. We asked, hey, wait a second, why is the Ketana Aser? It should be considered as nir b'bachutz because you see the Pesach of the Gedaylom. So we had an answer that we said based on 3 different criteria. We said, okay, wait a second. First of all, the walls of the small are going into the larger one. So therefore you can't see it as part of the near b'chutz, as if it's part of the walls of the smaller one, albeit that you can only see it from the outside. So the Gemara says, okay, wait a second, but then say love it. So he said, no. Because that amma, that the big one is bigger than the smaller one, you're right, on one side it's 2 tvachim, but the other side it's 4 tvachim. So you can't say love it. Okay, but you still say love it on one side. So you still have a lechi on one side. Says no, because you're saying like Rebbe, who requires 2 boards. And you're not having 2 boards because you're only having 1 board because one is bigger than 4 tvachim, and that you can't say love it, and therefore you don't see it as part of it because the walls are sticking in. So that was what Rav had said in the previous daf, why it doesn't contradict him that he holds that Nir B'Chutz V'Shav B'Fnim would be considered valid, but that Mishnah is not a Nir B'Chutz case. So then that's where our Gemara started today and says, wait a second, wait a second. If you're going to say that the case is talking about that the smaller one is exactly precise in the middle of the bigger one, and we hold Nir B'Chutz is not going to be considered as a lechi, not like you, it's not considered as a lechi, and Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yossi. That is, that the lechi requires 3 tfachim, even to permit the big one. And hence, we're not going with Ravina or Bezerah, because that's not going to be significant at all, because anyways, we can't say like Ravina, because we need to have that it should be, you can't have 4 and 2, because you need to have 3 and 3, because we're going like Rabbi Yossi, that to validate, you need to have a pass of 3 on either side. So that is why, and that was the punchline, why we're saying that the smaller one is 10 amas and the bigger one is 11 amas. Why are we saying the big one's 11 amas? So that we could have that it's bigger than the smaller one by an amma, because we need to have 3 plus 3, which are the 2 boards that Rebbe requires, which is again to be mater the gedolah. That's why it should be an amma bigger. But that's the question. According to you, the Nir B'Chutz is considered valid as a lechi. And why is the small one forbidden? Is because Ravina and Reb Zera, because it's going into that. You can't see it as Nir B'Chutz because the walls are going in, and also one's 4 and one's 2. And so then why is the big one permitted? Obviously because Rebbe does not hold like Rabbi Yossi, because if it's 4 and 2, you can't hold like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds it has to be a board of 3, and you're saying it's like Rebbe that you have to have on both sides 3. But according to you, you're having 4 and 2, because that's the only way you can answer why you're not going to have Nir B'Chutz. Because you can't say loved because you're having on one side 4, which is too far to say loved. But then if that's the case, why are you telling me that the bigger one is 11 amas? Either way, that number 11 is not precise. For us, it's precise because that's exactly why you're permitting the bigger one, because you have 3 and 3. Because Rebbe is like Rabbi Yossi, who even to permit the gedolim needs to have pasim of Gimel. But according to you, if you're coming to say to permit the bigger one, so why do you need 11? It could just be 10 and 2 tfachim. Because you're not holding like Rabbi Yossi, you could have a tefach on either side. And if it's to tell me why the small one is forbidden, then you should have said it bigger, because then that would be a definitive thing. I would know that that's why it's forbidden, because it's too far away to say love it. Obviously, says the Gemara, that no, it doesn't make sense. It's actually precise that it's an amma bigger because of 3 sides. You have a 3 tvachim on each side. And even though then you would have loved and you would have Nir B'Chutz, but Nir B'Chutz is not considered as a lechi. Never rejected Rabbi from the Mishnah and the Tzadi Beis because his interpretation doesn't make sense why it had to be that the Gedolah is amma bigger than the small. Now Rabbi Yossi said, he says, Lo Shmili, I didn't hear this teaching of Rav Huna, which is really Rabbi Rav Huna, but we're assuming it's from his father Rav Huna, that says that it is to be considered a lechi. I never heard that. You're right, it's like not like a lechi. Which Abaye said to him, wait a second, you told us this teaching. There was a teaching of Rav Huna that said that if there's a lechi that continues with the walls of the mavli, so it's like this is the mavli, and then the wall then continues and then goes like this. So Rav Huna said that if it's less than daled amas, so then that's going to be qualified as a lechi, and this is going to work. You just, however, could carry only up until, could only continue carrying up until the inner wall right over here. But if it's daled amas, then it's like a mavli, and then it's going to be usher. You can't use it. It's not even considered a lechi. So you said there's 3 halachas we learned from that. First of all, that the area opposite the lechi is going to be forbidden. That's why he said you can't use this area, because that's opposite the area of the lechi. Also, that obviously the length of a mavli is 4 amas, because you said if it's 4, then it's going to be usher. Obviously, that's the length of a mavli, because it turns into a mavli. And also that Nir B'Chutz is considered a lechi, because hey, this is something that continues with, it's a continuing along the length of the wall. You don't see from the inside, it just looks like a continuation of the wall. From the outside they see it, because you could see that it's a different wall, because it's not taking up the whole thickness of the wall. So you yourself said this teaching of Rav Huna, that Nir B'Chutz is considered a lechi. Don't tell us that you never heard this teaching. And the Gemara concludes that halacha is it is considered as a lechet. So wait a second, we refuted from the Mishnah of Daf Tzadi Beis, which we just proved in the beginning of the Amud that says obviously it's not considered as a lechi. And said, well, yeah, we still rule like it because Reb Chia has a brisa that says like that from the previous daf. When it's kanas the wall, we say we don't care if you could see it from the inside or the outside. So obviously the nibur chutz is going to be considered as a valid lechet. Then we explain the halacha of the Mishnah says if it's wider than 10 amas, okay, so you have to make it smaller, said the Mishnah, because it can't be wider than 10 amas. Then Abai brought a brisa that from Rabbi Yehuda that says no, that you don't have to. It could be wider than that. So how wide could that be? So the Gemara wanted to say, up until 13 and a third, not more than that. And a Kabbalah Chaimer from the boards of the wells, where there we're lenient, we allow even parts meruba, which then we don't let, and still it's only up until 13 and a third. For sure by the Mavi, they were letting it wider than 10, it's not going to be more than 13 and a third. Which the Gemara says, no, I can reject that on two sides. First of all, Mavi has more closed area than breach. So we would allow a greater leniency of what a Pesach is, even maybe more than 13 and a third, in contrast to Pasib Reis. It's part of Meruba, we can't let more than 13 and a third. Or I would say the other way, only by Pasib Reis are we lenient that we can allow 13 and a third. But by Mavi, where we don't have certain leniencies, maybe we would not allow the leniency, and be only up until 10 amas, and there is no raya from Pasib Reis. We said, so what do you do with a Mavi that's wide 20 amas? What do you do? It can't be wider than 10. So Levi taught a brisa that said what you do is you stick a pole in the middle, and that's it, sufficient. It broke it up into two parts, which Allah is not like that because as Rashi explained, which was the whole sugya on the base, because the avr is mavatlet. The ear space is so much greater than the pole in the middle, it's like the pole's not even there. So what do? So there are two approaches. Either you make a board that's 10 tefachim high, along the length of 4 amas, and you put it to the length of the mavi. So great, so this is the mavi, it's too wide, but now you put another board, it's like two different mavis side by side. Or the Gemara had another approach. What you do is you distance 2 amas, which is a breach, you leave 2 amas open, and then you make a board of 3 amas. And that's if it's 15 amas. And for our case, you do it on both sides. So this, the mavi, it's too wide. So you make a hole, and then you make a board, you make a hole, you make a board. And now this is the 10 amas that you could have. That's what you could do to minimize it. Now, on that approach of Rabbi Yehuda that says that you distance 2 and you make this 3, the Gemara says, why do you have to do it like that? You know what you could do is, and the Gemara had 3 different questions. You can make a board that's an am and a half, and you distance then 2 amas, and you make another board an am and a half. So you're going to have the total of these 2, which is a total of 3, because it's 1.5, and then you have the 2 in the middle. Why did you say that case? Obviously because that's only Merubal parts from 2 sides, because really this is 2 in the middle. These are only an am and a half. It's only the combination of 2 of them. Obviously that you didn't say that case because that wouldn't be good because that would only be from 2 sides. So the Gemara says no. Really that would normally work, but here you have the avir of the 2 sides that's been mevatel that one pole, because if the Pesach gadol on one side and you have the 2 amas that's bigger than it on both sides, that's mevatel, but generally we would say lemon merubal parts. Then the Gemara says, okay, a different case. Take a pasanama, distance an amma, and do that 3 times. Amma, breach amma, breach amma, amma. Why didn't you say that case? Obviously because here it's kipparts, and that's going to be us. So the Gemara, no, here also, you would normally say lemon kipparts would be good, but here you have the ear space from both sides of that last pole. You have that last pole which has more here, and therefore it's going to be mevatel this one pole over here, never that wouldn't work. Then the Gemara said a third approach, okay, what you do is distance an amma, then make a board an am and a half, do that 2 times, make a breach an amma, and then do again an am and a half, where here you can't say asavir the hagiz mevatel because the avir on one side is actually less than it's only an amma. So the Gemara, you're right, you could do that, but they didn't make you go through the effort to make a hole an amma, make an am and a half, make a whole amma. No, just do 2 amma breach, 3 amma wall, and that's going to diminish it. And why am I concerned that people are going to leave the large opening and go into the small opening? And then, if there's not an opening, then you don't have a lechi, and it's not going to be a mavi, because people are not going to leave a larger opening and go in the small opening. We have Rabami's halacha that we say that minatzad is a problem. That's because it's a might beluch. If you could do a shortcut through the side, that would concern us. We learned Mishnah Masechtas Kelim that said, if you have the leather seat of the toilet, and its space, and the cavity in the middle, they'll combine for the share of the tefach. How so? Either you have atzba'ayim 2 finger breadth together times 3, meaning you have this the seat, you have 2 and 2 and 2. That's a total of 6. Or you have a different opinion said you have an etzba and a half times 2. So you have an etzba and a half, and you have that on either side, and you have 2 etzba'is, and you have 1 etzba in the middle. That's going to be for 4. So the Gemara says they're not really disagreeing about that. It has to be shir b'tefach. It's just one's talking about thumbs and one's talking about pinkies. That's going to be a difference if it has to be 6 of them of the fingers or 4 of the fingers. But it's going to come out to be a tefach either way. On that, the Gemara says, and they're also not disagreeing about the halacha of Oimid Meruba Laparts Mebeit Stadim, because it does sound like from the words of Ravina that is what he's saying, that he doesn't hold the Oimid Meruba from Beit Stadim, because if that's the case, then he should have said an etzben a third times 3. Why doesn't he do that? Why does he say that it's etzben a half and only 1 in the middle? Obviously, because even though it would be if you said etzben a third on each one, then you would say meruba parts would be mevatla, because then that would be the case. If they're arguing about an etzben meruba from two tzadim, then according to Rabbi Dimi, he should have said it a different way. He should have said an etzban 2/3 from the two sides and etzba'ayim and 2/3 in the middle, which that would have been then the oimin meruba is only because of a combination, and he doesn't say that. So obviously, rather the machlek is only by parts ka'imid. Parts ka'imid is the machlekes. Yes, that they're disagreeing about, because here you have ka'imid, the parts is ka'imid, it's the same amount. And yet still we see that it's going to be valid according to Rav Dimi. According to Ravina, no, he says that this is only 1, it's less than each one. So you see that even ka'imid is not going to be valid regarding that, is what they're disagreeing about. Thank you to any time for hosting us.